I'm your host, Ira Naiman. The way I usually run panels is we usually let the panelists talk for about a half an hour or 40 minutes, and then I open it up for questions and comments from the audience. But I'm not a panel fascist, so if anybody says anything that you really feel the need to respond to in the moment, just get my attention and I'll get you at the earliest possible convenience. Usually, again, I think it's a good idea, since we don't necessarily all know each other, to have the panelists do a little bit of an introduction to themselves. So I will start at the far.
Thanks. My name is Brandon Draga. I write epic fantasy and fantasy children's books. I'm the author of The Summerlark Elf and The Missing Things War, which are available from Realmwalker Publishing Group, as well as Dragon in the Doghouse, which is also available from Realmwalker.
My name is Kelly Robson. I'm a new writer. I have 5 stories out this year, my first 5 publications. In Tor.com, novella at Tor.com, I have a story at Clark's World, and a story in Asimov's magazine. Awesome.
You killed it.
Totally killed it. And most recently, I have a story in License Expired, the unauthorized James Bond from Cheesy Publications, which is a very exciting anthology of James Bond stories, available only in Canada because only in Canada are the Ian Fleming stories, Ian Fleming books in public domain.
You know, I saw pictures of the event on Twitter, and I was wondering
How
you had a story.
And just in case you're interested, Kelly and I will be talking about that, among other things, on a panel in a couple of hours on professional writers writing fan fiction.
Oh, cool. Okay, nice. Hi, I'm Saladin Ahmed. I'm the author of a bunch of short stories, poems, articles, things, but probably most notably Throne of the Crescent Moon. My novel came out a few years ago, nominated for Hugo and Nebula, things like that. And the eternally stalled second book is in the works. Probably a year and some change from now will be out. And I'm thrilled to be one of the guests of honor here. I love Toronto. It's really exciting. And thank you everyone for having me. So, now we talk about how to embarrass ourselves on the internet.
So easy.
Really little effort. My name is Ira Naiman. I am a humor writer primarily, but I have been combining it with speculative fiction for about a decade now. I have 3 novels out. The latest is called Random Dingoes. They're from a small British science fiction publisher called Elsewhere Press, and a bunch of short stories in various anthologies. I just wanted to mention I will be reading from some of my stories at 5:30 today, so if anybody's interested in humorous science fiction, come check me out. Okay, so the obvious first question is, and I'll go through the panel again, what social media are you actually on? What do you have experience with?
I am on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. I'm very active on Reddit's R Fantasy sub forum. I had been holding off on getting an Instagram account literally forever, because it seemed incredibly insipid. But there's tons of people who tons of authors who are on Instagram, and after I found out I was on this panel, I kind of thought, well, you know, maybe it's not a bad idea if I grab that as well. Those are kind of my my primary avenues.
I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, Pinterest, I lurk at Tumblr, and I used to Instagram passionately, but there's only so much bandwidth for social media a person can actually accomplish.
Yeah, so I used to do Facebook quite a lot, and a couple of years ago, and maybe 2 years ago I just stopped using it completely, cold turkey. Didn't say anything to anyone. I just don't really use Facebook at all anymore. Not out of any particular principal reason, but because I pretty much live on Twitter right now. I have a Tumblr. I have some other stuff. Tumblr is if I was doing a lot of stuff posting old comics excerpts at one point, and Tumblr kind of lent itself better to that visually. I get occasionally, I'm lucky enough to get fan art, so Tumblr is kind of a more central hub for that than Twitter. But Twitter, I'm on constantly. It's obscene when I think about how many words I've spent on Twitter and how many possible novels that could be. But so that's definitely kind of my main area of expertise.
Yeah, I had a similar sort of experience when I started a few years ago. I was on both Twitter and Facebook. And the Facebook has kind of fallen off, and most of my attention is now on Twitter. But I should mention a few others. Goodreads, LinkedIn, and Flickr. As people will notice, I take photographs when I go to cons. I have, over the years, accumulated a couple thousand con photographs, mostly people in costume and stuff like that. And so I have a Flickr account where I put those up for people who want that. I like to think of it as a bit of giving back to the fans who come to conventions. Now, in terms of how much time a day do you give to social media, and especially since this has already come up, how do you balance that with actual writing? Poorly.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
it can suck hours out of your day.
It can, and it's such a different beast from sitting down and working on whatever your current work in progress is. It's much easier to make a stupid 140 character joke or 7 than it is to sit down and get those next couple paragraphs down. So I think it's really good for people who have their set points in the day when they know they're most creatively energetic. Set those aside for working on your piece, and then the rest of the time make stupid buy your book jokes like Sam Sykes.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't have to.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a very hard thing. I mean, for me, because the other part of the social media thing is the social, right? I mean, for me in particular right now, I was living in New York City for like 11 years. I was hooked into kind of the publishing social scene there. There's readings every other week. I had this community of writers, and my wife and I had twins. Couldn't afford New York anymore. Moved back to my ancestral Michigan, and now we're living in the burbs of Detroit. And I'm much more socially isolated, and also having kids. I'm the primary caretaker for 2 little ones. I don't have a really super thriving social life right now in meat space, and then a lot of other people just because for whatever of our various nerdy affectations or conditions or whatever there's a lot of us who spend more of our social time online than we do with other people, right? And so for me, I probably could look at Twitter and say, if I had spent X number of hours not on Twitter and just focused on writing, book 2 would be this much closer to being done, or might be out now. But at the same time, I might have completely lost my mind in the meantime, right? So I think it's the balance is kind of tripartite, right? Is kind of the social, the kind of self-promotion and networking stuff, and then just time where you do have to just kind of log off and pound out words.
Can I just say that meat space is probably the best alternate term for in real life I've
it's
ever
not
heard.
mine.
It's commonly used.
There are ways to maximize the value of your social media time. There are ways to really, if you're careful about curating your Facebook feed, you don't get a lot of junk in it if you're really on top of curating it. Same with Twitter. And another really great thing is to have a day job that you can steal time to do yourself. I know I do, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
Another thing that I wanted to bring up, I actually use a program called Hootsuite, which allows me to time my tweets over the day. And so actually, I only spend about a half an hour on Twitter a day, but because my tweets come out every few hours, it actually looks like my presence is there more than it is. Right? If you can, there are several products that allow you to do that. You should check into one of them.
But that brings up an interesting issue, because you're pushing stuff out to social media. That's not social. That's just one way out.
Right.
Social media is interactive. it's about engaging with people. So
yeah, it
you
depends.
Don't get
It depends
by
what your.
tweets, you don't get to back and forth.
It depends what your kind of intentions. I mean, definitely on Twitter, there are definitely services that host to like multiple platforms at once. And I mean, it's a mixed. You know, there's good and bad about this, right? Is that it is kind of automated. It's you can deal with several platforms at once without having to kind of stress too much. But it does look different. There are people on each platform that are kind of native to that platform, that are hanging out on that platform. And when stuff comes through that's kind of semi-automated and not engaged, you know, that's not a back and forth, it has a different kind of reception. So it all depends on kind of what your intention
Yeah,
is.
you can totally tell when
It's like being a jack of all trades versus kind of being a kind of specialist in some ways.
To be fair to me, though, I mean, I do spend some time, say, on Facebook,
Right.
actually responding to posts
Right.
and sort of doing the social thing when I have the time.
Sure.
But to me, it's a time management issue as much as anything.
I think so. And I think one of the ways to deal with that time management is to choose kind of the one or maybe at most two platforms that you're really going to have a real presence on. You have real kind of friendships that you build on there, and real networks that you build, and you're checking in on what's going on with other people, not just you kind of having people check in with you. For me, that's Twitter. You know, I couldn't do it on Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr and Google Plus when that was sort of a thing for 2 seconds.
Still around.
All those, you know, I couldn't do all of that at once. So I basically Twitter ended up feeling natural to me, and I'm, you know, people know that if they app me, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to that there's a real human there. But it does come at the price of like no promotion right now for me on Facebook, for instance.
There, one of the strategies that I do to make sure that I'm interacting with people is I have a special Twitter list, and I'm not using Hootsuite, although you can certainly do that as well. Make lists of people that you want to interact with. And my list is just called nice people. So basically, people I think are nice, who say interesting things, who I may or may not actually know. Then I can look there every hour or so and maybe retweet something that they've said that's interesting, maybe talk back to them.
Am I nice?
You are nice.
I know for myself, I tend to use different social media platforms to connect with different types of people. My Facebook account is mostly people that I have known personally, and you know that I kind of have that network of people to help be a street team, so to speak. Whereas Twitter has become much more, you know, about engaging with people I haven't met or with other professionals. Tumblr is just really great to find cool stuff. But yeah, it's definitely about finding, you know, which niche works best for you in which capacities. And
I think Goodreads, you mentioned, I think is definitely, it's now the Goodreads thing is now that should be basically a one-way thing. That's a place where I think it is essential to have your books up there, to do a giveaway on there if possible, just to establish a presence on there. That's a site that kind of snowballs on its own once you've got some kind of presence in there. But it's not a site to engage with readers, right? There's been some real debacles on Goodreads of readers doing these critical reviews and then authors trying to reply to them in the comments. And it's Goodreads in particular is I mean, you should never do that basically. but Goodreads is the least friendly place to do that because it's very much seen as a place for readers, you know. So, but it is important to have your book up there.
You cannot win an argument with a negative review. Even if you're right, you can't win it. So it's best not to engage in it. One thing that I think should really be emphasized, and it's been mentioned a couple of times, is that these things are social. One of the things that I find about Twitter, I follow a lot of writers. I think it's just a thing that you know, writers should do to support each other. But so many of them, the only thing you get from them is buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, right? And you know what I try and explain to people is, it's a relationship. Can you imagine meeting somebody in a bar and within the first 5 minutes asking them 20 times to buy your book? You know, they'll punch you. They'll you know, hit you over the head with a bottle or more likely just walk away and never listen to you again, right? It's very important to have a strategy about what you want to do beyond your sales efforts, right? I have seen the statistic. I'm not sure how valid this is, but you should limit yourself to about 10% sales messages, if that. Okay. That means that 90% of the stuff you're going to tweet has to be something other than a sales message, right? And you should have a strategy for that going in. I have at least one original tweet a day. I also retweet a lot. Retweeting is a very easy way of putting stuff out there, and also, and people don't kind of realize this, but by the things you choose to retweet, you're actually saying something about yourself. Right? So I find, because a lot of what I write is satirical, I retweet a lot of political stuff. I try to find humor and retweet that, because that's a lot of what I do. I do retweet not so much the sell messages, but when people have good advice about writing, stuff like that. And so this, when you put it all together, people who are following me on Twitter can get a really good sense of the things that I'm interested in.
You're just talking about being authentic and being expressing your own personality, which is absolutely so 100% the most important thing on social media, as in anywhere.
Yeah, the best advice I got when I was starting out in terms of self-marketing and whatnot was that people love to buy things, but they hate being sold to. And I think the people who are most successful in terms of using social media to kind of push their products and push their work are the people who just use social media as a means of being the best projection of themselves that they can be. I'm sure so many of us, especially in the last 10 years when this has really kind of become an important part of writing, have bought books solely based on interactions with an author as a person, be they online or at a con or whatnot. You meet an author or you get a review from an author or something, and you think, oh, hey, they're a cool person. I'm going to check out their stuff. Mike Sullivan is like the king of that.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's also a wonderful thing to be able to promote other people's work as well. Mm-hmm. I know they appreciate it, and it's so gratifying to be able to share stuff that you think is important and great. I tweeted this morning the story in the latest issue of Asimov's magazine by M. Bernardo called "We Jumped Down into the Dark." It's the most freaking brilliant story I've read all year, and I was so thrilled to be able to tweet about it.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, one of the things I do is do book reviews for amazing stories, and I should get more onto republishing them on Goodreads. It would be useful. But one of the most awesome things for me is just to find a book that I really love and want to share with other people.
Yeah.
And again, see, just so that I'm clear, this whole issue of authenticity and being yourself, it should be the easiest thing.
Yeah.
You're yourself, right?
Yes.
Don't try and figure out what you think people want. Just, do the things that interest you and promote the things that you like, and people will get the sense of who you are from that.
Absolutely.
Number one rule.
Now, I have my impression after a few years on social media is that social media is really great for fan service, but it's not necessarily that great for building a fan base. So it's like, once you actually have the fan base, then your fans will want to know when your next book comes out, where you're going to be appearing, all of that sort of stuff. But without that fan base, just trying to approach people who don't know you might not work so well. And there was this article, this amazing article in I'm pretty sure it's Salon magazine, but since I read it, I can't find it online anymore. It was about Hugh Howey's book, Wool. And it was actually an analysis of the social media that Hugh Howey used to promote Wool. And what the article found was he did a lot of sort of the social media things that people tell you to do, and they didn't seem to increase book sales all that much. He did a lot of stuff that he was told not to do. It didn't seem to hurt book sales all that much. The article ended up being, the article ended up concluding that what happened with Wool was Hugh Howey managed to get to about 20 or 30 people in his initial sort of promotional phase who were kind of the thought leaders, and then went out and proselytized the book to their 20 or 30 people, and it just kind of grew from that. The problem with that as a strategy for promoting books is you can't know in advance what 20 or 30 people are going to be the ones who are going to help you start that, start that cascade, right? So I'm wondering if you found that sort of thing that maybe it's good for your fans once you have some fans, but as an actual sales tool, it may not be that great.
Well, I think the thing is, so for those who don't know, so Wool by Hugh Howey was like massively successful self-published novel initially on Amazon, and then he sold the rights actually to, I think it was Random House, I'm not sure, a major publisher. I'm fairly sure it was Random House, but it was still just Random House, for obscene amounts of money, got a film deal. Savvily, he managed what was almost impossible to do, which is keeping the ebook rights for himself. And the guy's a millionaire, right? And so, as happens with this, is like everybody writes an analysis of, okay, how this happened. And, what it really, all these sort of breakdowns of, I've seen graphs of, and Michael Sullivan's another person who's sold, amazing amounts of books, mostly through his own kind of social media wrangling. But what nobody wants to kind of admit is that these things aren't necessarily replicable. These are not. I mean, if there was a formula, everybody would be using it. It's the same thing with the traditional. It's with a traditional bestseller. It's like people will tell you, oh, this is what goes into a bestseller. If people knew that, then everybody'd have bestsellers, right? There's a certain amount of kind of alchemy and magic to it that is just probably not reproducible. But I think that the general principle that when you're putting your stuff out there, it's having 5,000 followers is not so important as who those followers are, right? And if you start to make connections with people who have a large platform themselves or are connected, I'll give you an example. I've started to do some dabbling interest, exploring possibility of screenwriting, right? What I do now is when I watch a movie, I find out who the producers are on the movie in the credits. I look them up on Twitter because they're not famous. It's not like a movie star or even a super high-profile screenwriter or director, right? These are names that, and you look them up and they've got 300 followers on Twitter. But it's like this is a person moving in Hollywood circles deciding which movies get made and which don't, right? So, connect with them, and here and there you make a friendship with somebody, right? It's not always being that mercenary about it, but paying attention to kind of, now you don't want to get snotty and snobbish, right? But kind of paying attention to kind of who your message is going out to is always a useful thing rather than just kind of sending it broadly. I will say that I've had the opposite thing happen to me. I actually have had my readership grow significantly based on kind of Twitter almost exclusively on social media.
Because you post really interesting, unique content.
Well, thank you. But then it goes to the right person, they retweet it, and more followers. But it's true you can't do it exclusively through social media. It's that a couple of things a year I have an article in Salon or something on BuzzFeed, or I publish a short story somewhere, or whatever it is. There's a little bit being fed out, to the readership to help the readership grow. And there was a certain initial critical mass, right? It was like when I got on Twitter, I'd been nominated for some awards for short stories. The novel was getting ready to come out. It had a little bit of buzz around it. So it wasn't like I was just coming to it. And I think it's true. I don't necessarily know that you need a massive following already to kind of start a social media following that's useful, but you do need to be doing stuff in the real world at the same time, right? You're not going to build a writing career exclusively on social media. Right? You have to have good books that people want to read.
you just hit the core of it. At the end of the day, like, content's what matters. If you don't have a piece that people are going to enjoy, then you're probably going to get, if you're lucky, you're going to get a lot of followers and not a lot of book sales as a result. And you just kind of end up with, well, not what you intended.
I think that the most important, or at least in my this early stage of my career, the most important relationships to make on either Facebook or on Twitter are with my peers, with other writers who are in about the same career stage as I am. And there is a beautiful community of writers on Twitter. There's a gorgeous community of writers on Facebook. It is heaven to be able to, in the middle of my workday, log on to Facebook and see what other writers are thinking about it.
And that's huge. I mean, for all of me saying, influencers and get to know them and all that stuff. I mean, the people who are at the same stage of you as you, whether if you're a person who's published a short story or two, or has worked a lot on their craft but is still trying to break into publishing, that cohort of people who are kind of at the same stage of you, like nobody will be as supportive of you. You can tweet at George R. Martin all day. he's not really on Twitter in the first place, but I mean he has an account, but it's he doesn't really do anything with it just except say go to LiveJournal. Right? But and George is like the only person in the world who can still get away with that. Exponential more number of LiveJournal followers than most people have on any other platform. Right? But Stephen King is probably not going to reply to your tweets. But the people who are kind of in the same struggle as you at that point, that's where you'll build this kind of family. And some of those people will take off, and they'll remember, they'll remember who their friends were, and you'll be able to help them out, and it becomes this symbiotic thing that can be really beautiful. Not to be too cheesy about it.
Yeah. And that's something new, because I've been writing for decades, and the truth of the matter is that writing is and will always be a solitary kind of thing. But having these social networks is a great support that writers haven't always had. It's really worthwhile. Okay, we've got a couple of questions. Let's start with Katrina.
Well, it's sort of for Kelly, but it is more of, many of you mentioned very word-based social media, but Kelly's mentioned Instagram and Pinterest and Tumblr. I'm wondering, have you evolved different approaches to what are essentially more visual mediums, and does that is your work perceived differently, or basically what's the difference do you find between the visual sort of social media and the word-based?
Visual's harder. It's so much harder. I still don't understand Tumblr. I'm on there every day because that's where I get my fanfic.